Gotta get the thumbs up from the director here. All right.
Okay, we'll
Probably have
start this meeting. Can we have roll call?
Here. Here. Here.
Here?
Here.
This meeting of the Landuse Township Land Use Board was filed with the township clerk and sent to the Bernardsville News Bernardsville, the Courier News Somerville, and to all subscribers and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bernardsville, New Jersey, on January 13, 2016.
Okay, stand for the flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I see we have a resolution that we need to pass. Have you had an opportunity to look at it? I guess the, yes, the
Russ?
planning board people do not vote on this, I believe.
Correct.
Just the Board of Adjustment people. So do I hear a motion?
Do we have? I'll make the motion to approve the resolution. Second.
Mr. Landuse? Mr. Stevenson?
Aye.
And Ms. Rose?
Aye.
Resolution carries.
Okay, we have a couple of applications to deem complete. Mark, are you prepared to do that?
Yes.
Yes?
It's Bob Brightly with Ferrero Engineering. Mark.
Sorry?
It's Bob Brightly. I thought you said Mark.
Oh, sorry.
He's supposed to come, but I'm covering for
I'm sorry.
for Paul and then Mark also.
Okay, sorry.
The one application, the Sletland application,
Yes.
that's an application for a variance for a shed in the front yard for a lot on Cowperthwaite. It's actually at the corner of Cowperthwaite and Old River Road, and plus a letter June 2nd, 2016, where, it can be deemed complete, subject to compliance with that letter.
So if the board would entertain it, that would be a motion to deem the Sletland application complete with a waiver for remaining items for completeness subject to Paul's letter of June 2nd.
So moved. Second.
And a roll call, please.
Mr. Landuse?
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson?
Aye.
And Ms. Rose?
Aye. And then our Marif tonight's hearing. Had that complete? We did
Paul was going to do completeness in here.
at the same time. That's what I thought too. Okay.
Yeah, I only have one letter.
Yeah, I think he normally does it all in one when he does that, but at least the board still has to
So,
be complete, because we never.
You all have,
Okay.
you should have a letter.
Yeah, there is a
Basically, it's pretty
We
straightforward.
do. We do.
There is a complete report in the June 3rd letter. And there's, no objections to any of the checklist waiver requests. So he is recommending that the application be deemed complete, subject to the waivers identified in the June 3rd letter.
So if
Okay.
The board would entertain it would be to waive the remaining items for completeness and to deem the Myra Bedminster LLC application complete. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Mayor Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Landuse?
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson?
Aye.
And Ms. Rose?
Aye.
Now we can start.
Okay.
Gentlemen, we'll
Carol, I know
Yes.
there's probably nobody here
You're
for
right.
public comment.
You're right. We'll open it up to the public to see if there's anyone here that has something that is not on tonight's agenda. Seeing no one, we'll move on.
go ahead, gentlemen, and I'll swear in all the witnesses.
Good evening, Carl Rizzo of the law firm Cole Chance on behalf of the applicant, MyRef Bedminster LLC. We're here tonight for an application for preliminary and final site plan approval with a C variance for minor parking setback issue. Tonight, we're going to have three witnesses testify. First, we're going to have an owner representative, Joe Ravenel, who will talk about generally the purpose and intent of this application. And then professional engineer, Rob Michello, will walk us through the application, address any of the township professional concerns and comments, also addressing the statutory basis for the granting of the variance required here. And then professional planner Ron Kennedy will also address the statutory criteria. Without further delay, I'd like to call our first witness, Joe Ravenel, please.
Gentlemen, thank you, Joe. Why don't we get, I'll swear in all the witnesses just so we can go out of order if we need to. So, gentlemen, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God? And please state your names and spell your last name and give us an address, at least a business address.
Joseph Ravenel. Our last name is spelled R-A-V as in Victor, E-N-E-L-L-E. Business address would be 550 Hill Drive in Bedminster, Suite 104.
Thank you.
Robert Moshello, MLS, CHE-LLO, and address 65 Main Street, Gladstone.
Ronald Kennedy, Kennedy, 265 Main Street in Gladstone.
And we'll just confirm for the record that the board recognizes and accepts Rob Michello's qualifications as a professional engineer and Ronald Kennedy's qualifications as a professional planner and professional engineer. So
Thank
please
you.
go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the board, Madam Chair. Mr. Ravenel, can you identify for us what your position is and what your relationship is to the owner of the property?
Senior property manager with Avis & Young. We're a third-party managing agent for MyRef Bedminster LLC, which is pension fund, essentially is pension fund investments invested in real estate, which is managed by New York Life. And that's who we report to, is New York Life.
Okay, and in addition to being a property manager, are you a commercial real estate broker as well, licensed?
Correct. Real estate broker and certified property manager.
Okay, and how many years of experience do you have as a commercial real estate broker?
31.
Okay. And can you tell us basically the board benefit, what the purpose of this application is, and based upon your experience, what the need is for the application?
Essentially, what we're looking to do is increase the amount of parking on site. When the building was built in about 1988, typical parking for an office building was about 4 parking spaces per 1,000 rentable square feet. At the time, most offices had lots of hard-walled private offices, as opposed to now, a lot of organizations have actually eliminated hard-walled offices, even for senior executives, and gone to collaborative cubicle-type environments. And as a result, they're a denser environment. There's more people. Tenants are looking to put more, commercial tenants are looking to put more people in 1,000 rentable square feet than they did 25, 30 years ago.
And the result of that interest, you're seeking through this application to add parking spaces?
Correct. Ideally, we'd like to get up to roughly 5 spaces per 1,000 rentable square feet. That's deemed by most tenants or their representatives to be the ideal parking ratio. The more dense usages that we see today.
Now, although the property is currently virtually fully leased, is there some situation that is presenting a problem that needs to be addressed in the near future?
Correct. On August 31st, the lease for NPS, what used to be NPS Pharmaceutical, which became Shire Pharmaceutical, that lease expires on August 31st of this year. And at that point, we become about 70,000, almost 80,000 square feet of space goes vacant.
So as a result of that, there's an interest to make the property as marketable as possible. And the tenants in this marketplace are looking for the kind of parking ratio that you just identified. Is that correct?
We're actually below. The standard when the building was built was 4 per 1,000. When the building as built, or as it is now, is actually less than that. So we're actually below the current, I guess, if you were to approve the building today, we're below that without even a variance, just working within the guidelines.
I have nothing further for the witness. If there are any questions.
Board? Tom? Flick?
Thank you very much.
No.
Next, I'd like to call Robert Michelle. Council was good enough to acknowledge and the board recognizes his qualifications. He's being offered as a professional engineer, project engineer. So, Robert, if you would be kind enough to help walk us through this application and what you're trying to accomplish.
Sure. I have a couple of exhibits I'm going to go through tonight. Start with the first one.
How would the board like to have these marked?
Yeah, why don't you just tell us in advance, maybe all the exhibits, just so that I can get them all down. A1 is what?
A1 is entitled Aerial Exhibit,
Okay.
dated June 9, 2016. Some more keys as we go. Exhibit A2 is entitled Site Plan Rendering. 16. A3 is entitled Alternate Site Plan Rendering. A4 is entitled Existing Non-Conforming Parking Exhibit. And 5 is entitled Variance Parking Exhibit.
And for the purposes of the board, do you typically mark the plans that were submitted, or they're considered?
No, their plans will be considered part of the application, and you can just refer them as the plan set or the plan number.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what I have up here is Exhibit A1. It's the aerial exhibit. We're actually looking at 2012 state aerials that were flown a couple of years ago. North being straight up on the plan. We have Route 202, 206 heading in a north-south direction. We have the intersection with 202 Drive, just to the bottom side of the plan. Thank you. Just to the bottom side of the plan, you have the DOT yard to the west, 287 just to the west of that, the King Shopping Center to the south of Hills Drive, and then of course the property itself outlined in yellow, known as Block 59.26, Lot 11.02. It's 15.99 acres, and we refer to it as 500, which is 150 Hills Drive, which are the two existing office buildings. Each building is approximately 90,000 square feet in size. They have, inside of them, they have structured parking on the lowest level of the building, approximately 59 spaces in each building of structured parking. And then there's 579 surface spaces on the property. So there's a total of 697 parking spaces on the subject property today. The property is accessed by two main access points off of Hills Drive. The first access point is when you come in off of 202-206. It's across from the entry drive to the shopping center. The second entry point is further to the north before you get to Robertson Drive, and that's across from one of the existing residential access points to one of the residential developments to the south of Hills Drive. The parking lots generally lay out in such a way that they have this parking parallel to the two buildings in the middle. Then you have these perpendicular stalls that are laid out going away from the building in a sort of a fanned out pattern as you go around the subject site. Existing landscaping that's on the property today, that was there when the property was built, it was stalled. The existing utilities that are on the property that service the buildings, that also bring runoff into the existing detention pond, which is on the property. The pond itself was constructed as part of the Hills development for stormwater management. It picks up approximately 85 to 90 acres of runoff from the residential portions of the development as well as the commercial portions of it. It collects that runoff, detains it, provides water quality, and then discharges it under 202, 206 to a tributary that goes to the north branch of the Raritan River. That pond itself Right now, it's currently not regulated. I shouldn't say that. Right now, we're talking to DEP about whether or not they're actually going to have any regulatory authority over the pond. It does drain more than 50 acres of runoff, so there may be the need to have a riparian buffer on that pond of 50 feet. We're currently talking to DEP right now as to whether or not that would be considered regulated. After all, it is a man-made feature. It was built as part of a stormwater management system for the Hills development. So we're talking to them now about that. If it does have a buffer of 50 foot that's associated with it, we would go ahead and obtain whatever approvals we may need from DEP for the project. But right now, from talking to them, it looks like it may not, but we're still going through that process with DEP in terms of the environmental constraints around that pond. There are no other existing steep slopes or other environmental constraints in the property as far as floodplains or anything like that goes. It's just the pond itself that is on the property is the environmental constraint there. So the proposed project itself, what we're looking to do here is add additional parking to the property. So I'm going to move on to Exhibit A2, which is titled Site Plan Rendering. So Mr. Ravenel pointed out there's a need for additional parking based upon future tenant demands for certain office buildings. Right now, we're just under the 4 per thousand parking requirement for what tenants typically used to look for. Now they're looking to go more towards a 5 per thousand parking requirement. As a matter of fact, according to your ordinance, the parking requirement here would be 805 spaces would be required per your 1 per 225 ordinance requirement. We're at 697 existing spaces, as I had pointed out. So what we're looking to do here is increase parking on site, and we're going to do that in basically 2 different ways. One is to reconfigure the existing parking areas that are there today to make them a little bit more efficient from what was there originally. And then secondly, look to add some additional parking where we can in and around the pond area. So you still have your 2 main access points coming off of Hills Drive. We're going to look to reconfigure some of the parking in the front of the site closest to Hills Drive, fill in some parking that's in the berm area there. That's going to require the parking setback variance that we're requesting tonight. That's the parking here, and I have an exhibit that shows that more closely. We're looking to add some small parking up towards the front to fill in some areas there, fill in a couple spaces along the parking rows, and then we're looking in towards the rear of Building 500. We're looking to add some additional parking that's in some lawn areas now, in that rear area to reconfigure that space and get some more parking there, as well as parking behind the building. As you go around the northern portion of the site by the 550 Hills Drive building, those were the parking spaces that were radiating out away from the building in a fan pattern. We're looking to basically reconfigure those into more of a parallel radial pattern that follows around the site to make that parking a little bit more efficient and pick up some additional spaces in that area as well, push the parking a little bit closer to the pond, and then add an additional parking bay up towards the northern portion of the site. With our proposed parking increase, we're taking the site from the 697 spaces up to a total of 894 spaces on the property. Gets us closer to that 1 per 5,000, just slightly under about 4.8, 4.9 per 5,000 in terms of the number of spaces. In order to do that, we'll have to remove the existing landscape trees that were planted on the property when the parking lot was built, and we'll be looking to plant new landscaping in the new parking areas. We're approximately removing about 100 trees. We're going to be putting back a little over 100 trees in the form of deciduous, evergreens, and ornamental trees in and around the plot area itself. We're going to look to enhance some of the berm plantings that are along the front here, and I show that on another exhibit, as well as provide some shrubbery plantings, which is not shown on this plan, in some of the islands in the parking area to enhance that as well, to comply with your ordinance requirements for landscaping within the parking areas. The other modification we have to make to the plan is modify the parking lot lighting. A couple weeks ago, this was the subject of an application where we came in and changed out all the existing parking lot lights. They high-pressure metal halide parking lot lights, the colonial style, and we removed those and put in all LED lights across the entire parking lot. Those have been installed. They've been there for about 2.5 years now. And so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to relocate a lot of those lights and install some new lights in order to redistribute the lighting for the new parking areas. So there's approximately 71 lights on the property today. We're going to add another 15 additional lights to light the additional parking areas that are there. the levels will comply with your ordinance. They're still the same dark sky compliant lights with the source of the light on top of the light fixture, and they'll still be the same colonial style light that's out there. We're just going to have more of them on the property. And at the mounting height that's out there today, we're not going to make any of them higher. A few of the lights will require house side shields when you get up to the northern portion of the parking lot. There are residential homes to the north of that area, so we'll have house side shields on those lights as per your ordinance requirements. There were a number of comments in Mr. Ferraro's review letter that typically we can comply with, most of the technical comments that he mentioned there. There were one or two comments that he had brought up that involve some concerns with the circulation in terms of the design, and this has to do with the entry feature that we have here. With the proposed parking lots, we actually propose to tie those lots into the entry drive that comes off of Hills Drive for circulation purposes. And Mr. pointed out that he felt that there might be a better way to reconfigure this. We took a look at that, and we have another exhibit here that's entitled Alternate Site Plan Rendering, which is just to eliminate those access points to Hills Drive and keep it internal to the parking lots themselves. So we took the parking that was going to go out here and connect it back into the internal loop road. And then for the two parking islands that were coming down and connecting to the Hills Drive entryway, we closed them off and just put a loop connector so you can drive around that, so you can drive around those spaces as opposed to coming back out onto Hills Drive. You still have access into the parking bays, but this way you're not interacting with the vehicles that are coming in and out of the site. By doing this, we do end up losing a couple spaces, so the total count goes from 894 spaces down to 885 spaces. Because we lost some spaces to the turnaround at the end here.
Robert, just so I understand, the A3 is a modification to what's in the plans that were submitted as part of the application?
Correct. It's addressing Mr. Ferraro's comment about the circulation in this area here. And so we showed that on the plan here, and if the board were to approve the application, it would be reflected on the revised plans.
Are you proposing that you're going with right now?
Yes, we would go with.
So it's not an alternate,
We call it alternate, but this would be the new one if the board would approve the application. That addresses that. Before, I also had a comment about the closeness of the retaining wall to the building. We actually moved it a little further away and took a space out of there as well. If you look at the plan, if you go back to Exhibit A2, the retaining wall was actually right to the corner of the building, so we took a space out and shifted it over and moved the wall over about 10 feet, so we had some more room there. Just for construction purposes more than anything else. With the parking lot reconfigurations, there's going to be the need to relocate some of the dumpster enclosures that are out there. So we're proposing new locations for those dumpster enclosures. They would have fencing around them. The fencing would typically match the existing generator fencing that's out there in terms of the style and the color. And we also have to relocate the existing generator as well. Which is on the plan today. Generally in this location, my pointers, we're going to have to move that over to inside of one of the islands because we can't have it in the parking area anymore. So we relocate that also. There will be to do some reconfigurations of the on-site stormwater collection system, add some inlets at certain locations and tie that into the existing storm lines that come into the site and discharge into the pond. And Mr. Ferraro had some comments in terms of some of the site utilities and the manholes, which we'll take care of as part of addressing his review letter. He requested some additional stormwater calculations in his review letter, which we can certainly comply with. Mr. Banish also had some comments in his review letter talking about the providing some additional landscaping in some of the islands, and which for shrub massing, which we can certainly do. Providing the house side shields on the lights, which we can do, and also providing some additional evergreen plantings up towards the northern portion of this parking lot area here, which we can certainly provide as well on the plans. Next exhibit I'd like to move on to discuss.
Well, I'm sorry, let me ask just a quick question first. With the reconfiguring of the lots themselves going from radiating out to kind of circles, I guess, are the actual lanes that the cars drive between parking rows, are they tightened a little bit to help you get some more spots?
No, they're 24 foot wide, the standard size, and the stalls are all 9 by 18 in size. So we didn't reduce any of those widths.
The reason I ask is your site, but experience with the market lot, since that was built, those areas got narrower, and if you have cars going in both directions, it gets kind of tight. That could have been simply modified by just going in one direction.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's germane to yours, because I can't see how wide they are, or if that's a standard amount, but...
The 24-foot is the standard aisle width.
And you're not going to have the same traffic that a shopping center has, but that's just a concern.
Yeah, we kept standard aisle widths, and we kept the standard stall spaces 9 by 18. And we actually have the planted islands in the middle to have that overhang as well. But I understand your
Yeah, I just want to make sure that, I know you're trying to get as many spots in, and I think that's a good idea, just so it's...
Yep, geometry-wise, we complied with all the standards. We didn't look to try to reduce anything to get any more spaces in there. But it's a valid point in question.
And that's true, so your aisle width is still appropriate for that turn, based upon Paul's comment?
We maintain the 24-foot aisle width through here for the turn, so you could have two-way traffic.
You can have two-way traffic.
Going through there, yes. Although we don't anticipate a lot of volume going through there, but nonetheless, you have that ability to have two-way traffic there. And maintained 10 feet from the to the curb line, so we could put some additional plantings in there, just landscaping if they decide to do something in there anyway. Because the property is, well maintained now with the landscaping, so they may look to add some additional shrubs there in the future on their own accord. But we have that's there to do that.
And by the way, if you didn't have the room, or if you thought the room was tight, I would not suggest that you get rid of parking spots. I would just use a couple gallons of paint and make sure they're one way.
Yeah.
Just put a line going one way, so, if that was a concern, and I don't know that it is.
Understood.
So,
Rob, I just asked you now, if DEP requires your buffering, you've left enough room there with the parking for your buffering?
DEP requires a 50-foot buffer. We're going to have to get some permits from them. And the reason why we can typically obtain them is it's all lawn or pond. I go back to Exhibit A1.
Mm-hmm.
You can see generally this is all maintained lawn around this entire pond. It's mowed and maintained, so we can get a permit to disturb that. If that was wooded vegetation like you see out here, that'd be a different issue from a permitting perspective. But it's already disturbed, so we can get a permit to do that. They put a 50-foot riparian buffer on the pond.
Okay. It's not marked on here. That's why I was looking to see the measurements.
Correct. Yeah, it probably comes out, 50 foot's probably generally, through here.
Yeah, it looked like it was tight.
Yeah, it's going to catch some of the parking, which we would have to go get that permit from them to do that.
And if we're on the subject of the permit, what conditions do you anticipate DP putting on the permit? Mitigation of any kind?
It would be within the disturbance limits for a riparian zone. So, I don't see that as being a concern. They might ask for some additional tree plantings maybe around the pond in the other direction, but we can certainly do that. But we would be within the disturbance limits for the permit. So I wouldn't anticipate any major restrictions. The only thing I could think of is if they did issue the permit, they might just limit the time you could cut down a couple of trees that we'd have to clear in and around the area.
Okay.
Great. What I want to talk about next is generally the property zoning, and this is what comes into the setback variance. So essentially the project, new impervious coverage of about 0.86 acres. We still comply with the coverage requirements for the site, 60% lot coverage in the zone. This was at, excuse me for one moment.
I had that somewhere.
The site was at approximately 45.2% lot coverage, and with the increase in parking, it'll go up to about 50.5% lot coverage. So still well under the lot coverage requirements for your ordinance. However, we are asking for a setback variance. Your ordinance requires a 25-foot parking setback around the property perimeter, and we are requesting relief from that. And I have two exhibits that I want to present, and then we'll have Mr. Kennedy's testimony on the planning aspects of the parking. This exhibit that I have here is entitled Exhibit A4. It's existing non-conforming parking exhibit. This exhibit shows the existing spaces on the property today that don't conform to that 25-foot setback. There are spaces along the front of the property that don't conform right now, and then there's 46 spaces along the, I'll say, the northeast property line that do not conform. These are approximately, the ones along the northeast property line are approximately 15 feet setback from the property line, and ones right now along the front are probably set back 20 feet from the property line. This exhibit shows what's existing today that's non-conforming. And then the next exhibit that I have is entitled Exhibit A5. It's variance parking exhibit. What I'm going on here, in the lighter green is the existing non-conforming, and in the darker green on here are the spaces we're asking for the setback variances for. So along the fringe of Hills Drive, we're looking to infill that section that's there today between the two rows of existing spaces. We're looking to put approximately 32 spaces in there and that will require a setback at its closest point of approximately 10.4 feet. As you go away from that closest point, it eventually goes back out to the 25-foot setback. And we have 10 spaces where we continue those along the northeastern property line to the south. We're adding 10 spaces. They have the same 15-foot setback that exists today for the existing spaces. And there's 12 spaces on the north side that's also going to be at that same 15-foot setback going towards the northwest on the property. To add, in total, we're looking at about 54 parking spaces that we're adding that would be part of the parking setback variance around the perimeter of the property to meet the parking total of 885 that we have on the plans.
So Rob, so I understand, what you just described, a large portion of the additional parking that we're adding is consistent with the type of setback that exists in the light colored non-conforming parking, is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you talk about the lighting in the area where you need the variance for the setback?
Lighting, there's two different locations. We have lighting on the northern portion of it. We're adding a light there. We're adding two lights up in that area for that parking area with the house side shields. This side will be shielded because that's the side that faces towards the homes. Another light over here. I don't think we have a shield on that one. I could just check. Because it wasn't facing towards residences, it was actually facing up against the existing office complex that's there. Take a look at the lighting plan. The lights down, the additional lights over here don't have a house side shield on them, but again, it backs up to an existing parking lot that's right on the other side of it. And then the lights along the additional lights we're adding along Hills Drive, we're actually going to have to move the existing lights that are there just further back because we're adding the parking in there. They don't have shields on them either, but they're right across the street from the King's Shopping Center. So
Right, but there's still light.
Correct, there's still light.
Right, I mean, would you consider or talk about the impact of putting shields on those lights in that area where you're asking for the setback variance?
Where do you want house shields, George?
I think we're just looking for in here, correct, George?
Just asking,
I mean,
how it would impact the light that...
It wouldn't really impact the parking because we'd be putting the shields. The lights are going basically this side of the parking area on the south side. So if we were to put the shields on the lights, it would basically reduce the levels going towards Hills Drive.
Yeah,
going
off the property.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we can certainly look to do. I don't think it's going to be an issue to add those. If that was something where you want to just kind of limit that spillover, we could do that there.
I mean, I think it would help.
Yeah, I see an issue with doing that.
How many did you say you were
It would
planning
just
again?
be almost like having additional streetlights on Hills
Right.
Drive.
Right,
Yeah,
I want to
right.
see the
Which-
potholes on Hills Drive.
Before I add 'em.
Having extra light there might not be such a bad thing.
So it'd be 4 lights if you wanted to look to do
Four
it,
lights.
yeah.
I mean, it would make sense to me because you are encroaching into the setback area there. You know, that anything we can do to minimize the light pollution, I think is a good thing.
Yeah, the shields aren't an issue to install. They're just part of the optics in the light, so it's something we could certainly do.
Okay.
I have a direct testimony.
Talk about landscaping or, no?
Well, the landscaping, I can go back to, if just to point it out again, we were removing approximately 103 trees on the property, and that's a combination of the ornamentals that are on the property that were planted in and around the parking areas, and we're taking out about 10 to 12 trees up in this area over here to install that parking lot. And we are proposing 104 trees are being proposed, a mix of deciduous trees, evergreen trees, and ornamentals to re-landscape the parking area, as well as at least 51 shrubs. We're actually going to look to do some more shrub massing in and along Hills Drive. We don't want to overload that front portion there. There's a berm there today. It's about 4.5 foot high. We're probably going to take it down about 2 feet when we put that parking in. But the be a berm there, and so we'll look to do some plantings on top of that berm, just to minimize the view of the cars that are there. But we don't want to block off the views completely into the property, so we want to kind of have a combination of both. And then we're going to add those additional evergreens that Mr. Banish asked for up in here. So we'll probably be upwards of 120 or 40 new trees by the time we're done planting
The
the property.
residential section doesn't come down further there?
If I go back to the residential section, this is the parking lot here for the office complex. I'll go back to
Okay,
exhibit
so that's office
Put
there.
A1 area.
A1, yeah. So if I show that,
Okay.
you'll see where this is the parking lot for the adjacent office complex. So that new parking lot's going right in this area right here. So you're almost actually up against the existing trash enclosures and parking area for that residential area. You do have some homes over here, but they're set further back. So we're in this area right here, right to the corner of the property line over there. So we'll add the existing landscaping there. And then we'll also put some shrubs there as well to do some low level and also some higher with the evergreens.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Rizzo, if I can ask you a question, or perhaps for Mr. Ravenel.
Sure.
Your point of doing this is to bring this property into compliance to make it attractive to a potential tenant. Hearing the revised plan, you're losing some spots, and the original plan didn't provide for the spots that you really wanted to bring it up to snuff. And my question just simply is, do we feel that the revised plan would be sufficient to satisfy potential tenants' concerns about the property, such that they're going to want
Yeah, 5 or 6 spots. Yeah, I mean, we're obviously trying to accommodate the interests and concerns of your town experts. So that was the impetus for doing that, and our client doesn't think that that's going to be a tremendous negative impact on what they're trying to accomplish.
Have any prospective tenants mentioned that the parking is an issue for them? And
We haven't seriously marketed
okay.
this space yet.
I should point out to that question, we're seeing this more and more on a lot of the larger office campuses around here. And we're probably doing looking to do a half dozen applications right now for some of the surrounding large tenant office complexes to add additional parking. Talking about these same exact situations that Mr. Ravenel is bringing up about having additional parking on site. So it's trending that way more and more over the last year than we've seen in the past. So,
in your opinion, the revised plan would alleviate the concern that you have about the lack of parking? It would
Yes.
bring it to a point where you feel comfortable that it would be marketable? And,
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions?
Questions for Rob?
Yeah, I just,
Oh, I'm sorry, go right ahead, Bob.
you mentioned that you were talking with the DEP. You've actually made an application for a jurisdictional determination?
we submitted paperwork to do a pre-application meeting with them to talk about it. We've called them on the phone. We've had the discussions, but they wanted the paperwork to take a look at it and have a pre-app to see whether or not they even feel there's a buffer there. And if there is, we might have to do we'll then do a formal application with the determination at the same time and go in that way.
Most of the comments in Paul's letter, are, technical, but the one comment he had is the phasing plan. Have you given any thought to how you're going to actually construct this?
Yeah, we were talking about that. Depending on a couple of things, depending on the tenant's need too. If there's a tenant that says they need maybe half or all of it or whatever their need may be. But the way the site's laid out, we can build it in sections if need be.
Section is the real.
So this is probably the biggest section, but we can maybe, depending on how the fans go, we might be able to split it. But most likely what we'd look to do is prior to filing for the construction permits, once we know what our tenant makeup may be, then we'll come in with a phasing plan to deal with how we would build these sections accordingly and provide that to the township engineer so that could be followed during construction. But it's broken up in such a way that we can work on it in segments and because we can't just do it all at once because you're going to lose too many parking spaces to actually build it.
Rob, you know what the parking count is at the other office building?
Trev, no, I don't know what
Medical building, you mean?
the total number is there.
East.
No, I don't know what the count is there. I should say to that note, although, the spaces that are closest to the northeastern property line, there's an easement over the parking spaces for the users of this medical building. So this whole row of parking spaces here, they have the right to park in those spaces should they need them.
But you can't, and it's been a while since I've been to that building, but my recollection is you can't get from one parking lot to the other, right?
There's actually, there was a paver connector piece right here at the northern portion. Believe it or not, right now, both in the tenants of this building and the tenants of this building have their dumpsters over there. So you can't get through there right now. So there hasn't been the need to use them. But this tenant does have the right to park in these spaces should they need the space. So there's a shared parking agreement there between the two.
So there's a shared parking agreement, but no access.
But no access right now. So apparently they haven't needed it in some time.
So you can park over there, but you can only get back as a pedestrian.
There's no sidewalks.
Right.
You jump. Okay, I don't see anyone from the public. And we'll have our next
Thank you.
witness.
Thank you, Robert. Next, I'd like to call Ronald Kennedy, professional planner.
Good evening.
Board again for recognizing his qualifications and offering you plenty of testimony necessary for the variance.
I'll attempt to be quick. Just some background. Obviously, this board realizes that this is Bedminster's first and only PUD that is in the township. And the components that we're talking about, Rob, just go back to the first, the aerial. The components that we're talking about here represent the commercial pieces that are on Exhibit A1. So obviously, the Spine Road of Hills Drive connecting 202 to 206 to Washington Valley Road was the key component of the layout. And this is the area that was designated by the town and the developer of being the commercial center, or commercial side of things. The predominant feature on this particular lot was 2 office buildings, 90,000 square foot apiece. Rob talked about the other office building, which was really designated as a medical office building that had different uses, different parking requirements. That was designated, that was just to the east or the right side of the sheet there. That was the medical component to service the community. And then the retail that you can clearly see on the plan that was just to the south of Hills Drive. It was designed as a boulevard road, quite wide. It had dedicated left-hand turn lanes at the appropriate locations along Hills Drive. And, well, I don't think it was actually in the original plan, but this right-of-way for Robertson Drive that came later as more acquisition happened from the Hills development occurred, and the acquisition towards Schley Mountain Road. You have a new road, Robertson Drive, that ultimately connected into Schley Mountain Road. That services as the entrance to the medical office building. Rob pointed out there's 2 driveways that are key components to the entries to the office component, and they line up, one across the main driveway into the King's Supermarket or the retail center, and then the other driveway that lines up across from Mayfield and the first neighborhood on the right as you come in. As described by both witnesses, we have a Class A office complex of 2 buildings. They're highly maintained. They're designed in the same theme that those 2 buildings, as well as the Meta building architecturally, and quite frankly, the King's building architecturally. The same details, same bricks, the same banding. So all 4 buildings, actually more than that, 5 or 6 buildings because of the standalone pads, were all designed as one theme, one element. And that was the theme that was carried out, and the highest density in the Hills development was back in this commercial area. The road corridor itself, Hills Drive, was an important feature of the design, albeit lacking sidewalks, which we're now experiencing now, that was never contemplated originally. It has some pretty gracious wide travel lanes that were there with, again, these dedicated right turn and left turn lanes that went into there. Needs change, as Rob mentioned, the need for more parking. We're working on a half a dozen projects right now that our small office is doing in the region. And not only are they Class A office buildings that we're working on, but we're also working for end users, large end users that are adding substantial parking to their properties now, including Pfizer, Bayer, and Verizon, that we're doing this very similar thing. So this is not just the speculative office market for private equity firms or landowners. We're actually doing this for end users too, where they're changing the way they work, the way they behave, the way they're operating, and cubes are going. Not only the private offices, cubes are going. You've got workspaces, workrooms, and the market's reacting to that. So that's the needs base that's going on here. So obviously, the plan was to take what already exists. We're not moving the buildings. We're not moving Hills Drive. Can't move the pond. And how do you make it most efficient into those spaces? So we reviewed your zoning. We reviewed typical design standards associated with that. And in doing that, from either the previous granted relief, which we don't know if one was granted or not, but that design standard appeared to be, the 25-foot setback appeared to be there when the original PUD zone was written. But there is areas along, certainly the northern property line, the eastern property line that's common to the medical building, that encroaches into that 25-foot buffer for quite a number of spaces. And you saw that with Rob's Exhibit A5. There's also a slight encroachment along Hills Drive with those parking spaces of a fair amount of spaces that encroach, not much, but encroach into a little wedge into that 25-foot buffer. What we're able to do is expand those areas and expand the number, but with the same theme that it would be set back to those eastern property line, set back to approximately 10 foot from the property line to the front of the space, and that's what exists today, and we'd extend that line both in a northwest direction and a southeast direction, so towards Cortland and then towards Hills Drive. And along Hills Drive itself, there would be a wedge that we're talking about extending in there. And what this Exhibit A5 doesn't really show effectively, it shows the big bulk of spaces themselves, but it doesn't show that it's only a portion of each of these parking spaces that go into the 25-foot buffer. So there's areas that are only a wedge of parking spaces, that these last 5 or 6 spaces themselves, we're literally talking a matter of inches and feet as it expands out. And only at the apex of that is the farthest distance where the buffer would be reduced down. I think it's 14.5 foot. Okay, that would be reduced down there. So there's only a few spaces that encroach a lot only encroach a little. And the key component of this is, if this was approved, if this was constructed, if the landscaping was put in as per the plan, in a year or two after that landscape was knitted in, you wouldn't see any difference driving down Hills Drive than you see today. There'd be no perceptible difference to the public that there was a change and there was an encroachment into that landscape area or that buffer that's there. Likewise, with the area that's up against the medical building itself, the parking lot on the medical building is only 5 or 10 feet away from the property line. So they're tight there. And again, thematically, those buildings all look like one complex. While the property line there, no one can see that property line. They can't feel it, they can't see it, it's just there.
And can you just repeat what you said so that the parking setback from the medical building is 5 feet?
Right now, it's 10, well, the medical building parking spaces in this location here is 5 feet or less in a couple of those spaces. And there's about 5 or 6 spaces in this area where the parking setback to the building is about 5 feet.
So just to clarify, those two dark green spaces there and there, setback from parking on the other side of the property line?
They are. There's parking, across the lot line, there's parking on the other side.
Of which the owner on the other side of the lot has an agreement to try to share parking. So the idea that you're creating a buffer between 2 parking lots, of which you have 2 owners that wish to share parking, it doesn't...
Pretty irrelevant.
You're protecting yourself from nothing,
Right.
really.
Well, the island is a barrier to actually
Yeah.
usefulness of the shared parking.
Yeah.
Right.
And candidly, if this is a maintenance issue, maybe an enforcement issue, is this cross connects here. The problem is both groups have dumpsters in front. So in this plan for this applicant, they're proposing to put their own dumpster in here, and hopefully those containers can go there. And I'm sure with the discussion with the medical folks that own that building, you can do the same thing so that cross can exist.
But that's shared, well, we don't have the right to share in their parking, they have the right to share in our parking, so if we
So,
make it
walkway.
available to them, it's up to them to open up that access.
Yeah.
So obviously, from a planning standpoint, we're really talking about a C2 variance where we're talking about the benefits have to substantially outweigh any detriments. We're talking about a slight increase in the setbacks for the number of parking spaces, and more importantly, for the context that it sits in. And I think that the context that it sits in with this variance is a de minimis relief that we're asking for. Again, it's the common property lines or even Hills Drive. It'll appear to be no different afterwards. It won't be perceptible that there's been relief given or a violation of that 25-foot setback. Additionally, we look to the other side of Hills Drive at the King Shopping Center itself, and while those parking spaces, some of those slightly go into the encroachment areas, similar to this, slightly go in some of those things. They have a sidewalk and a landscape area. It looks like a lot more higher, and candidly, it's not as well maintained as this property there. So driving down Hillside, you look at the office building side, you see a nice crisp edge, highly maintained, landscaping's in great shape.
Beautiful.
You look across the street, not good. Hopefully that can come back with time, but, it's not as good. But this owner has a high deal of maintenance on this to make the property valuable to themselves, and again, to the residents that drive up and down that roadway. And there's going to be the same character after we plant the new landscaping. Landscaping that's coming out is at the point, like a lot of the landscaping in the hills, where it's met its natural life. These have gotten too large. They were planted as, trees to have a certain function. So some of these trees that are coming out that we're talking about, or shrub masses, need the fact that they're overgrown. They've reached the maturity to a certain degree of living in that context. And
Their
we'll be taking
roots
those down.
start interfering
Yeah.
with the sidewalks.
And they're getting leggy, so if there was
Yeah.
small screening or low scrub
Right.
that are now higher, you can see
Yeah.
right underneath,
Yeah.
and it's not providing any screening at all.
Right.
So it will freshen up some of those intents that are there that will help, I think, in the overall appearance of the property. As far as the negative criteria, again, streetscape along the road is not going to change. You're not going to see the property line between the medical building and this building. No one will understand that and see it. It'll look like just an adjacent parking aisle, or an aisle between two parking lots. Enhanced landscaping will be provided that'll be more in keeping with how I would perceive an office building to look, rather than some of these larger leggy plant materials that are out there. So clear with this, I think it's something that the board can grant that won't have an impact to the zone plan and your zoning ordinance.
And the landscaping is all approved by our engineering, by Paul?
They looked at it, they reviewed it. I think both your planner and your engineer looked at it. If there's comments, we'll certainly
I
take
think
into consideration.
standard procedure, I believe. Yep. Okay, anyone from the board?
Now, I just have a question for our planner. Do you agree with the assessment of parking demands for new office space?
Yes, I think that is a growing trend. I think in this case, given the size of the space, buildings, the additional parking is probably warranted.
Okay, thank you.
And Bob, anything further?
I just, he recommended extending that row of Colorado spruce trees. I don't know.
We agree to that.
We've indicated that we're amenable to that.
Okay. Anyone from the public? Seeing none, I guess we can proceed.
If the board is ready, you might consider a motion to approve the preliminary and final site plan and the variance and any site plan exceptions subject to standard conditions and its following Frank's report and the requirements that or accepted by the applicant that the house shield to be placed on the lights that are in the setback area and the reduced setback area, even if they're not facing the house. I think that was what you have.
And we're talking about the revised plan?
And this is the approval of the alternate plan, which the applicant probably replied to Mr. Ferraro.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mayor Parker?
Aye?
Mr. Jacobs?
Aye.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Aye.
Mr. Stevenson?
Aye.
And Mr. Efron?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Consider that we need to be effective immediately, so we can proceed even sooner than the written resolution.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll ask the planning board if they have any comments.
Nope.
No comments?
This time?
No comments?
Congratulations, Doug.
You'll be leaving us, I guess?
want to count my chickens.
No, but,
Sorry, we keep Larry.
Oh, Trina, you say the nicest thing.
yeah, that's, what
I
happened?
just passed my course,
She
too.
just passed, you know, and
Yeah. Actually, I'm afraid
we just get them and they pass right through. I guess we,
We'll see what happens.
we graduate them. Okay. That's the way it goes. All right, so we have our hearing next in July. We're not meeting July 7th. We're meeting the 14th. And we have Chesson, and we have Bedminster too on that night, too? P and Cone.
Those are all Board of
Okay.
Adjustment?
They're all Board of Adjustment. And then, do you want to put these on, or you want to wait till July? We could probably wait till July to put them on, or we need to do that now so they can notice?
The only one I think we could schedule is Sletland.
Okay.
We could put that on for the first meeting.
For meeting in August?
Right now.
All right, so that they have time to notice.
Yeah, I figured, because I don't think he's looked at Marino yet. So
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay, so we'll do it in August. Okay. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
We're all done.